from. The estimates that UN provides is that it'll probably take 300 years for us to be able to bridge the gender gap if the current pace carries on. And this year's theme for Women's Day was, rights, justice, and action. And, in a backdrop of that, there's this tectonic shift happening with artificial intelligence. The digital landscape is obviously going to profoundly change everything that we know, right, in each and every aspect of life. And in this, point of history, really, there is surely going to be transformative change. But is it going to be, I mean, which direction is that change going to go towards, right? So there is this whole positive aspect where we can leapfrog into the future, we can correct historic wrongs, we can have, we can make huge advances, but we also have to be really, really cautious that at the same time, there can be this possibility. In fact, there's a high chance that there'll be increased gender-based violence. There could be exclusion and regression of norms. So it's really at that point of time where we have to be a little more strategic, deliberate, proactive, to think how we are going to be able to embrace this phase, and not be bystanders, but being kind of owning it with agency and ready to negotiate risks, and then really all of us collectively crafting a new future for ourselves. So I'm really excited and looking forward to the conversation that you guys are going to have. And I hope, Nida, that you'll keep enough time for Q&A, because we have a lot of young people who are joining, and I'm sure they're going to have a whole lot of questions. So yeah, I hand it back to you. Welcome everybody, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Laura. Absolutely. Thank you for that, setting the context. And just to get it started, that, I would request that everyone who's here as participants, please use the chat box to share your questions. If questions are coming up, please keep sharing them on the chat box. We will be collating them at the end, and during Q&A, we will be asking the panelists and putting those questions forward. So just have some patience, keep sharing your questions. Of course, we will not allow you to unmute yourselves right now, because right now we let the panelists give their perspectives. But towards the end, we will be sharing your questions. So please chat box ka istemal kare. Use the chat box, yeah. Thanks so much. I think the first thing that we're going to do, even before we get started, is to understand how do we currently use AI in our everyday life. I know casually conversations में बहुत लोग बोलते हैं, right? Everybody's using AI. But before that, हम थोड़ा flavor लेना चाहेंगे इस group से. And if I can request Mariam to share the online poll on your screens, and if we can quickly do a quick poll on how are we currently using AI. आप सबके screen पे you will see that there is a poll that will come. How do we use AI in our everyday life? It's a multiple choice question, so you can click multiple answers. It's interesting. The whole bunch of people who are still to answer. Request everyone, all the participants, to quickly look at the poll, which is in front of you on your screens, on how do you use AI in your everyday life? We'll take we'll take another 1 or 2 minutes maximum for everyone to use the poll. Okay. Yeah, is everyone almost done using the poll? So then maybe we can share back. Uh, yeah, Mariam, can we share back the results? Okay. So it's very interesting to see how many of us are already interacting with AI tools in our everyday life. So I can see, from about 80% people are using it, for example, for information research. About 74% are using it for content creation. About 49% people are using it for design, creativity. About 60% are using it for academic work or work tasks or problem solving. It's very interesting, but 0% people are using it for dating or social networking apps, which I find very surprising actually, because I know many of us are on these apps. Um, and about 43% people are using it for productivity, note taking, managing their tasks. And about 14% people in the group have shared that I'm curious about AI, but I'm not actively using it right now. uh, so I'm going to stop sharing now. uh, and thanks, I think इतने अलग अलग तरीकों में AI is already embedded into our lives, and therefore I think it becomes even more critical, especially when these technologies are so deeply embedded in our life. It becomes very, very critical to then talk about equity, to talk about bias, to talk about accountability in technology, especially as these technologies are growing, and the speed at which they are growing is quite fast. Uh, Thanks. I think I'll move to my first opening question. And this question is for all three of you, Jyoti, Neha, and Shohini, that how are you seeing people engage with AI today in terms of aspirations, opportunities, concerns, and the way organizations like yourselves or communities are responding to these technologies? If you could just share like a brief overview for us. And maybe, Shohini, would you like to go first?
Sure. Thank you so much. Thanks, Nida, for having me here and for that question. And also, I really appreciate that we started with a poll because I think we're seeing people use AI in the ways that people have said here already for information sharing, for homeworks. But I think it's important to just take a step back and contextualize that when we're talking about AI today, we're talking about it in active use, right? We're talking about generative AI. Although AI has been there for a while, there's been in our recommendations, in spam filters, in our emails, in maps. Um, but really, we're for this context, we're talking about generative AI, and it's being used, misused. So whether it's, someone's using it in Canva to design things, whether people are using ChatGPT for homework, for translation, we're even seeing some people use it as companions, as friends, to get advice. And I think there's a general perception, and acknowledgement that yes, there might be hallucinations, yes, there are some harms around it. We know that AI is used for, creating deep fakes, and so images can be misused there. There are also like some acknowledgement on how our data, when we are engaging with the AI, is being used to train, privacy concerns. But I think there are, kind of two schools of thought, despite knowing these harms, or despite having various degrees of wariness about the potential downsides of using AI. One is that there is a general feeling that AI is inevitable, it's here to stay. And so if you don't get on the bandwagon, you're going to be left behind, especially amongst younger people, which, I mean, I think as we go on, I would like to contest that. Really, when we talk about AI and the current form of its adoption, is it inevitable and can we do something about it? But that's, I think, later on. And then the second thing is that that any form of technology has some potential harm. So this is just that. This is an extension of it. And while there is some element of like continuity to that yes, there are the structural problems, the inequities, the power imbalance, the harms, the gender norms that existed in offline spaces and in other technologies. And when I say technology, I'm using quite broadly in that, even when the car came around, like what did that look like? That yes, that because that has existed before, it's the same here. And while there is some like truth to that, there's also AI systems are are unique in some of its harms that it can enact. So I'll just leave it at that. I mean, I think people are already engaging with it, and if not engaging, they are aware of it, they're curious about it. And even when we don't see it in visible ways, we are engaging with AI, and AI is engaging with us in invisible ways all the time. So yeah, that would be my point.
Thanks for that, Shohini. Um, Jyoti, Neha, either one of you could go next.
Sure. I can go next if
Yeah.
if that works. Um, Thanks, Nida, for having me and for thinking of us when you were thinking of hosting this dialogue as well. Um, I think, like, as a young person myself, and because we work with young people a lot, I was also very shocked when I saw that no one voted in the dating um, poll, because we have heard a lot of young people um, use a lot of AI platforms to ask questions about, oh, how should I dress up? I have This is my first date. How should I dress up? Or like who pays on the first date? Things like that. But then we've also seen like young people use it for interview preparations, or to, like, develop their CVs, etc. And across all of the things that Shohini mentioned as well. But what we've noticed so far is that young people like have this clear division, where there is a section of young people who are very aware of how using AI tools is harming the environment, and kind of contributing to climate change, etc. And so they're very against using AI tools. And then there's another section of young people who um, want to keep using AI to upskill themselves, um, amongst other things. So I feel like, yeah, as Shoini said, and as we saw on the poll as well, um, a lot of young people are already familiar with AI and they're using it in different aspects, even as like a therapy tool. um, but yeah, I feel like there's still um, um, like we are just like touching the surface of it, and there's still like a long way to go.
Thanks, Neha. Uh, Jyoti, yeah, I'd like to hear from you. What's your take?
Yeah.
And how do you look at it, organizationally from that perspective as well? Uh,
Thanks, Nida. Thanks for inviting me and, of course, curating the whole session. I won't, both my co-panelists have spoken about how young people are using AI, and I wouldn't want to repeat all of that. But like you'd said earlier, we've been using AI without even realizing it for a long time. It's very recent that we've all woken up to the fact that Gen AI and data and privacy and these conversations are really, really out there. It's in the news. Everyone's talking about it. The AI summit just was a big, boom in the conversations. What that brought, of course, we in the policy space and in this space, we've been talking about it for a long time. We've been working on DPDP. We've been working all of us together on policy advocacy. But what's really, I think I would take it as a plus is there is a lot of curiosity amongst everyone, not just the young generation, everyone I talk to around what is AI, where are we using it, where is my data going, what is privacy. So that is something very positive that came out of the summit, I would say. And yeah, you did a poll which was self-explanatory. We all know where we're using AI. We kind of know where we're using it, where our data is going. I would just take that as a positive thing. We are not completely all of us aware how long and where all we're using AI, but it's good to be curious. That would be my take on this question.
yeah, thanks, Jyoti. And I think that really paints the sort of frame and backdrop and picture that there are ways that we know we are using AI, and there are possible ways that we don't understand how we're using AI, but there's constant interaction that is happening. It's constantly guiding our actions, it's constantly governing our lives. And I like what you all said, that uh, there are very obvious, there's a lot of this, I must upskill myself, I must upskill the quality of my work or even my thoughts using AI. There are some very practical and real concerns and anxieties regarding AI as well, which a lot of people, and particularly young people, are particularly starting to think about, and it's starting to also come out from a policy perspective. Although some of us have been talking about it for years, it's finally coming into the mainstream space, and how it's going to be governed. So I think that that kind of lays the block of it. I think I want to go to Shohini next, actually, and from this kind of setting of how AI is being perceived and used, and the challenges and aspirations people have to, Shohini, when we speak about AI today, the focus is obviously on, what's the final output, or what's visible, the application, so to speak. And this is what I'll put in. This will be my ready-made saman that I will get, and this is how I will use it. But feminist lens, will also ask us to interrogate the process, right? The labor, what goes behind the data, the power structures, behind this system. Where are we already seeing the gender bias being reproduced in AI systems and digital technologies from your point of view? And who does AI represent? Who does it not represent? Because it's clearly representing some people and it's clearly not representing some people. And some forms of knowledge are being pushed forward, and some forms of knowledge or information are being excluded, right? So just want your perspective on that.
Thanks for that, Nida. And that's quite I think, lecture in itself, but I'll try and keep it short. Yes, I think it is very important to look at the structural elements of an AI system, not just the outputs. And even the use of the word artificial intelligence, the way that it's conceptualized, the way it's often talked about, it's presented as this neutral, ephemeral thing that exists kind of outside us and outside of people. But labor is such a central part of any AI system. I mean, it's really like when people often talk about data is the foundational source of an AI functioning, but data is nothing without the people who are giving it not just meaning, but annotating it, giving it the what the AI system should do with it, right? So it's not just who's creating the AI, but the labor that it's built on, and this labor is invisible. It's often gendered. Who are the data annotators? Who are the moderators who are training the data? The low wages, working conditions, and all of those things that come around it. It's very when we think about not just gendered biases, but the harms that come out of AI, that has to be a central element of it. There was a Guardian piece that I think came out pretty recently that a content moderator was viewing some 800 videos or images per day to train the algorithm to recognize what harm is. So what does it mean for that person? How much support are they getting in terms of whether it's labor, whether it's like the PTSD that's coming out of watching this type of violence on a regular basis, right? And and when we talk about AI, that type of labor, that gendered, exploited labor is often invisibilized. I think the other very crucial element of it is data, but not just the data itself. It's often spoken about in terms of oil or mining. If we can just mine this data, we'll be able to like get whether it's a context specific AI. Like now, again, I think in light of like the AI summit and more people looking at what does it look like when AI is developed from the global majority, we talk about having better data. If we can just collect this data that exists, the outputs are going to be better. But what data are we using? What does it mean? Who's using it? It's not neutral. Like we give numbers, their voice, we draw inferences from them, and we define what it means through our interpretation of it. So the interpretation of this data, the classification of it, oftentimes is based on existing power, unequal power structures that was there in creating the original data set. So, that's, and that can lead to gendered bias. So I'll give you an example of the use of AI in agriculture. If we are looking at, how can we help women in agriculture, women small farmers, and we use data in the form of land ownership to give interpretation or to give meaning to this model that's going to be used for women farmers. We know that the land ownership is very gendered, like who has land ownership, but who is working on the land is also very gendered. So the implication of the data that gets used and the interpretation of that data gets used translates into biased outputs. I think the other thing that I want to also flag is that one is the data itself and the creation of the data, but the knowledge production that is there as an output of AI, of any AI system. It's, some AI scientists have stated that there's a desire to capture the world and supersede all other forms of knowing through making all of these by making all of this data that's there, that exists, come into AI systems. But there's a tendency of homogenization, a tendency of a certain way of knowledge being produced, because the people who are giving interpretation to that data are often men from, global minorities, um, and and so again, I'll come back to kind of, at various levels, what data is being used, who's doing the interpretation of the data, whose labor, whose bodies are being uh, whose bodies are being exploited to give it meaning. And then finally, the bias that comes out of all of that is really important to consider when you're looking at any AI system and the potential the potential harms, including algorithmic biases.
Yeah, thanks for that. And I think thanks for the example in particular, because it leaves you thinking that there's always like that air of caution that, look, AI is going to give you a great bana banaya answer. It's going to pull in data and information and knowledge from various sources. But if you don't have a critical lens of analyzing what AI has presented to you, you're just possibly reproducing bias. Very realistically, you are reproducing bias, which has been handed to you in a platter almost. So, thank you for, I think, painting that picture. And I want to move next to you, Neha. I know, huh, you you've kind of briefly in the beginning itself, when I asked you about, how are you seeing people engage with AI and what are the aspirations versus opportunities. You kind of already spelled it out, how young people have a very diverse relationship with AI, right? I mean, like you said, climate change, employment, future of work. There is this whole piece about this whole narrative being pushed forward, very genuine concern about the future of work and how AI will make many jobs redundant, right? And I know people are worried about that, right? And on the other hand, many of us young people, we're using AI for upskilling ourselves. We're experimenting with various AI tools, like you said, from social grooming and how we present ourselves in relationships on a date to, work and academics and problem solving. you know uh, so what I want to understand from you, Neha, is that if you could give us a few more examples of, on one hand, young people are looking at AI as this bridge to skill gaps and new possibilities. But are there also like concerns and anxieties emerging, around these technologies? And how are you seeing that, particularly, when you guys engage with narrative building with young people at Yuva? How do you see that?
Yeah, no, thanks for that question. I think there are definitely concerns, and we've mentioned them um, before as well. But I feel like I'll also use an example like Shokini did. But last year, there were a lot of cases around young people using AI to seek therapy. And instead of, like, redirecting them to sources or to helplines, um, AI is acting as a therapist of it, like on its own, instead of directing them to helplines. There was also a case regarding like suicide. A young person had asked, what are like painless ways to, you know, um, um, and instead of again redirecting them to a helpline, the AI had responded to the young person. So I feel like there are definitely like these bigger concerns that we have seen, and also I feel like uh, there's also this like feeling of loneliness. This generation already like feels lonely a lot, and as Shohini I think mentioned earlier, they seek companionship, and AI kind of like uh, feels like a companion to them. So that's why they approach it and they ask them, like, they kind of share their struggles and they ask them for advice in return. But I feel like platforms need to be very careful in terms of not engaging in these kind of conversations, and instead, like, directing them um, to the correct kind of resources or helplines that they require. At the same time, there's also like a lot of anxiety about the future of work, as you said. I feel like a lot of people are just very anxious about, oh, my jobs are going to go in the next few years. Even now in the tech sector, a lot, again, last year we saw a lot of tech jobs, a lot of layoffs in tech. And that too has kind of resulted in increase in suicides, increase in young people kind of isolating themselves. And yeah, I feel like that's what we've been noticing and hearing when we engage with young people a lot as well.
Yeah, thanks for that, Neha. And that also makes it very, very real, right? That all the upskilling and all the upskilling yourself with AI is fantastic, but it's slowly becoming a replacement, like many other technologies, to human connections, right? And to possibly what cannot be reproduced by technology, and where one needs to intervene to counter the harm, right? And I think that's very real. Thanks for raising that, because these things don't get spoken of as much as possible. I mean, as much as the excitement that young people are very excited about technologies, they're tech savvy, that gets spoken about a lot. But the other side of the coin doesn't get spoken about so much. So thanks for putting that into perspective. Uh, I think, Jyoti, I want to come to you next. That, I mean, as AI and these technologies become embedded in our daily lives, questions of trust, of safety, and accountability become so important, right? And these are things possibly from at least those of us in the gender space have been shouting this for a while, but now it's also coming into a larger policy space, because the stakeholders for utilizing these technologies have also increased. It's also come into the mainstream, and so therefore the concerns will also be larger, right? So I'd like to understand from you, what are the emerging concerns around digital safety and trust in AI driven systems, particularly for young people, for women, for girls? And what do you see, what are the gaps, or opportunity areas, according to you, that you have been focusing on, but whether it's platform accountability or policy frameworks or simple stuff like public awareness? What are some of those highlights for you that you've been focusing on?
Um, Thanks, Nida. Thanks for that question. We've been working in this space for, a decade now. We were doing safety online for women and children, and then, with the advent of the artificial intelligence, we're all grappling. There is a lot of opportunity for us to, accelerate growth, but yeah, you're right. There are a lot of concerns. So what AI is doing is it's scaling the old harms in new ways. It does not create inequality from scratch, but it often scales the existing gender harms. We're also seeing amplifying of online abuse in a very, very big way, like AI generated sexual content, sexualized content and deepfakes, automated harassments and bot manipulations. There are not, we work a lot on NCII, non-consensual intimate images that are being shared in a very big way. So these harm affects women very, very disproportionately, especially women, in the spotlight, like women journalists, activists, politicians, and young girls online. The speed of the technology is outpacing safety systems. Platforms are deploying AI very, very rapidly, but trust and safety systems are like an afterthought, mostly after they have deployed the systems. And moderation frameworks and reporting systems, all of us are trying to just catch up to the harms. So we've been playing this catch up game with the internet for a very long time, and with AI, it's getting more and more difficult to actually, because the speed at which the harms are actually happening, we're finding it very hard to catch up to that. The major gaps that we see today, because of which it's becoming more difficult, is policy and regulation. They are still evolving. We don't know where we are and where it will land. Platform transparency, unfortunately, remains very limited at this point. Again, we go back to policy because of this. And then public awareness is very, very low. I know in cities like Delhi, Bangalore, Mumbai, we think we know where we are, but it's a very big problem. The awareness about where and what and how in the other towns and villages in the country, that's a very, very big issue. What we need to do here is that, and we've been talking about this for a long time, is gender needs to be integrated in the governance frameworks for AI. Platform platform accountability mechanisms need to evolve much before AI harms. We need to get ahead of the harms than catch up to them. And also digital literacy and safety education, which we've been advocating for over a decade now. This is no more a question of if it is required, it's the only way forward. This has to become like a mandate, especially in public institutions, for young users. At CSR, we've seen through our work that digital safety, through initiatives like the Trust and Safety India Festival that we convened last year, and again we're doing this year, the conversations between policymakers, platforms, civil society, conversations like the one we are having right now, they're extremely important for the message to go forward. Yeah.
Thanks for that, Jyoti. And I think I know you covered a little bit, you covered a little bit of how CSR looks at it. But I mean, I really like it. Shoini, Neha, if you both would also like to just share a little bit of, how do you guys when we're putting out narratives of AI and other technologies through a feminist lens, how do you guys put it out there organizationally, whether from point of view or whether from Yuva? If you can just briefly share in a few lines. I'd like our participants to also kind of understand that, the myriad different ways that all of our organizations are working. So just if I can get a few quick words from you guys on that before I move to the next question. Yeah.
Sure. I can go. I think um, this is more of a broader lens than just a feminist lens. But what we have seen is young people will care about AI or any upcoming, um, kind of thematic area if it's already like if we talk about it at the intersection of causes that they're already they care about. So it's similar to kind of climate, right? Climate, when young people think about it, it's very data driven, it's very like scientific. um, they don't know how to participate in it, and we feel like AI is kind of similar in that sense, right? But if we talk about um, AI at the intersection of gender and the gender bias that Jyoti and both Shohini talked about, it's creating the gender inequality. Um, or if we talk about it at the intersection of mental health, then I feel like young people like engage more, and that's how we try to like create the way that we communicate to them about AI as well.
Thanks for that, Neha. Yeah. Shoini, what about you?
So I think our approach to AI has been the same as our approach to technology. That in the phygital world today, where physical and digital like exists seamlessly with each other, and what's real and real, it's all
Yeah.
blurred and the same in some ways. digital participation is essential. Uh, the I think the parallel is with the digital space is a public space, and the parallel is in with if there's street harassment, if there's violence in public spaces in the offline, the answer has never been let's withdraw from it. It's always okay. What are the structures that enable this? What are the support mechanisms that can happen to
Yeah.
prevent this? And if it happens, what next? So I think
What
we
next?
treat it in the same way that people want to use it, digital and violence in whether it's gendered harms through algorithmic biases of AI systems or AI enabled harms in the form of deepfakes that Jyoti was talking about. Despite that being there is a barrier to full and free participation. So, with that as the premise and the foundation, then what are the things that are important, right? So, one is access, knowledge. How do you safely use it? What does it mean to safely use? What are the risks? What are the harms? What are the structural power systems and gendered norms that already exist in your everyday life, um, that that are important to, like, foreground existing knowledge that's already there, right? Like, that's important to foreground. So capacity building is a crucial element of it. And the second is responding to harms. So if someone, we run a helpline called TechSecchi. It's a Hindi-based digital safety and security helpline. So if someone's facing AI-related harms, not algorithmic bias, because that's not something that we can do at a one-on-one basis, but individual harms that have
Yeah.
happened in the form of deepfakes, in the form of, say, voice cloning used to commit financial fraud.
Yeah.
We provide support on what next, what are the reporting mechanisms, what can you do to address that current issue, and then again, how can you safely use it moving forward if that is what you choose to do. I think it's also important to situate the fact that while digital participation, full and free digital participation is something that is essential, and if one wants it, it's equally important that that shouldn't exclude those who decide not to participate in the digital space, right? If digital inclusion is a barrier to, say, accessing resources and opportunities,
Yeah.
I think that's also I think it's important to not just say that one has to do it, but yeah, if one chooses to, what is the best way forward? And
Yeah.
then of course, to like foreground experiences, knowledge, harms that are happening to various stakeholders who may be looking at it from a very singular or sometimes global majority perspective. If you're looking
Yeah.
at like things like image-based abuse, for example, right? Um, if you're looking at it from that perspective, how can we, at Point of View and with other civil society organizations, foreground the experiences that are often not foregrounded?
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for that, Shohini. And I think, you've already actually ventured into my next question, which is very interesting. So, because my next question is, we had decided as all of us co-panelists that we would talk about this question about uh, online harassment and harm in the digital spaces separately to really foreground it. And it's also one of the questions that a lot of people who registered for this webinar had asked. So uh, I would like to understand from all three of you, what do you see as the most pressing concerns today around digital violence, online harm, misuse of AI technologies, and what are the gaps in how we are currently responding to address that those kinds of harms, what are the gaps, and what could be better approaches, to plug those gaps in the first place, so that we're better prepared for these challenges. I mean, you spoke about deep fakes, AI generated abuse. Somebody spoke, Neha spoke about AI has become a therapist tool and is, you know, telling people ways to commit suicide. Jyoti spoke so much more about various other things, and also financial fraud, which is a common for the middle age group, are being targeted. So there are many many forms, right, of digital harm and online violence that are happening, some more obvious and some less obvious. So I'd like to hear from you guys, what are some of those forms of harm, the gaps, and the approaches that you think are needed to shift to deal
Yeah,
with them better.
I think I'll go next.
Yeah, go for it.
It's been lovely listening to the other panelists. We've already spoken about the harms a little bit. I'll just touch upon them very, very briefly. We know AI generated abuse. We know manipulation and influence. By manipulation and influence, I mean a very realistic misinformation that has been created. And we work a lot with women in the political life or public life, and who are particularly vulnerable to reputation attacks or character assassinations. We've seen this in the past all over the world. Women give up office because of harassment online. There's a lot of emotional manipulation, like we said, through AI. There is a lot of reliance on AI companions. Kids are chatting with AI, and there develops this emotional bond between their chatbot and them. Also raises the question of trust and dependency and vulnerability, and how we are exposing people to the tech without understanding the depth and where it is going. So the gaps that we see, and I spoke about this earlier as well, are that many legal systems were designed much, much before Gen AI came into play. We don't know where we are exactly, where that's going to land. So a lot of work is being done by the government in producing the best policies possible, but we're hoping they'll be flexible since tech keeps evolving. We're hoping there'll be evolving policies. Also, we need clearer frameworks around consent, around synthetic media accountability. Yes, there were synthetic media rules that did come out earlier, but we're waiting for better guardrails or more specific policies on that. What we think, or we've always believed, is that there needs to be a collaborative response. The government, tech platforms, civil societies, users, academicians, globally, we all need to work together. We've been talking about collaboration for a long time, but it's time it is put into action. It is actually implemented. There are multiple global, forums where this is one topic that comes out unilaterally, but it is time that it is also implemented. I mean, we're already late, but that is the only way this will work. Across platforms, researchers, there is a lot of research that is happening in silos across the globe. So everyone, there needs to be a collective action. And because of which, last year, I'm sure you're aware, we brought out we fronted the Alliance for Cyber Trust and Safety, where we're trying to collaboratively work with all organizations working in this space, especially in the global south. So yeah, that's my 2 cents worth.
Thanks for that, Jyoti. Yeah, that lays out the bigger picture really well. I'd like to hear from, from you, Neha. What's your take on this?
I think Jyoti pretty much covered everything, but I think just from uh, a real life example perspective, uh, late last year and earlier this year, we saw unconsensual images being spread across Grok, and a lot of young people and other users in general on X were misusing essentially AI. But what has happened is the rollback is not that Grok has stopped, making these images. The rollback is that they've just done it for now. It's only available to subscribed users, and not to people who are using it for free. So I feel like in instances like these, a little bit of platform accountability is also um, kind of a question here. um yeah, and I think, just to add to this, it's not like Grok or X's guidelines, safety guidelines that they already had in place. It's not like that they didn't already state that any nudity, etc., is not, uh, is punishable or is not supported, etc. But it still happened. So yeah, I feel like platform accountability, or just working with platforms to ensure that the guardrails that they've already put in place, they're ensuring that they are followed, is also something that uh, we should be talking about.
Thanks for that, Neha. Showing you already answered a little bit of it before, but are there any other examples that you would want to bring in to this piece specifically about forms of digital harm? Any particular examples and the gaps and some approaches that you think are currently missing?
Yeah, I mean, I've already spoken about it a little bit. I think Jyoti and Neha did an excellent job of covering, the harms as well as like gaps and approaches. I just want to mention again that I think what AI has done in with respect to technology facilitated gender based violence is that the technology, it's made it easier to misuse the technology. I think it accelerates the harm, it scales the harm, the volume gets higher, and I'll give you 3 4 examples. One of the things that we often see from our helpline is impersonation and creation of fake profiles. Now, what the availability of AI systems that make deepfake easier makes it so that the perpetrator who wants to commit the reputational harm and the emotional harm to the survivor by creating this fake profile and perhaps uh, putting sexualizing content or whatever else, it's now easier for them because now they can just upload some photos and create this deepfake video that's more realistic. Issues like doxing, data might be easier to scrape with the use of AI systems. Surveillance and location tracking. I think again these things exist and have existed, and what AI does is make it easier and put it at scale. I think the other point I wanted to make was about gender disinformation. So again, disinformation existed previously as well. So you don't have to create a deepfake video, but you can recontextualize a video and just say that this is, spread some disinformation. But there is often a gendered component of that, right? Like it's used, the bodies of women are used to perpetuate various forms of disinformation. I think there are 3 or 4 gaps, some of which have already been mentioned. One is, yes, accountability mechanisms need to really be in place, and not just in place, but implemented with as much political will from platforms, from various stakeholders, along with investment. So if AI models can create these very realistic, images, or can generative AI can help us write novels. Uh, why can't these systems and why can't investment be given as much to solve certain basic problems? So, for example, many of our callers often have a challenge of reporting in different platforms, and not just AI related harms, but different types of harms. They don't know under what category this should get, this should get filed under. And AI systems can help in things like this. Chen has a fantastic resource like that called Survivor AI, which basically you put your narrative there, and then based on whichever platform you want to, report your issue under, your violation, your harassment, whatever you have faced under, it uses AI technology to facilitate that. Now, this is created by civil society organizations. This can be implemented. So I think accountability mechanisms of responsible stakeholders need to be there, and for not just at the point of when harm has been committed, but prior to the rollout of AI systems. I think there's responsible AI. It puts the onus on companies, but it's not sufficient for individual companies and their, what they decide to do, to be to put forward. I think some amount of regulation is required, but as Jyoti has highlighted, there are also challenges with that, in that we're all constantly playing catch up. The last thing I do want to share is, because this iteration of technology being used to commit harms, and technology infrastructures existing in ways that enact gendered harms. So not just like, the output in form of the deep fake, but also the algorithmic bias that exists in terms of the infrastructure, as well as the invisibilizing of the labor. So with regards to all of this, in some ways, these elements are not new, and therefore fundamental structural imbalances and power, unequal power relations, gender norms, those things have to be addressed for a comprehensive and cohesive action around, around like dealing with the risks and harms related to AI.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Shohini, because it really puts it into perspective, because harm is not just for someone who may be targeted on a particular platform with non-consensual sexualized images, or their data, them being doxxed, by their data being on, shown all over the place, but also by the data enumerators at the back end, who are training that platform, that algorithm that is being made, exposed to I don't know how many hours of really traumatic, violent data. And what's the safeguard for them? What's the trauma informed service for them? And they're being paid pittance, right? And there was a recent report, on how these data enumerators and trainers are women from rural India, who are being paid, little pittance, for work that is extremely challenging and difficult and harmful. So thank you for raising that, what's visible and invisible. There's so much that you guys have, and I said this, we had put this out in our registration itself, that, we, meaning all of us, all four of us, and our organizations, we are not proponents of AI versus, for or against. We're not saying that. We're laying the conversation bare open. There are exciting things to look forward to with AI, but there are also very, very real concerns and challenges, right? So we're not, for all participants, we're not saying that this is good versus this is bad. We're saying this needs to be looked at, right? Because AI is not going anywhere. These technologies are not going anywhere. In fact, they are becoming more and more embedded in our day-to-day life, and how I think particularly as young people when we negotiate the world, moving forward. And so, therefore, the question remains then that as we look ahead, how should we be engaging with AI, as young people, as institutions, as policymakers, as citizens? I mean, uh, is it that I'm always going to be at the mercy of these technologies like the algorithm is driving me, and am I just like a passive consumer, with no power in my hands? Or is there a way for me as an individual or as a group to engage with it more actively and responsibly, right? And what I'd like to know from all three of my panelists, from all three of you here, is that, are there examples, of AI or digital tech? And I'm expanding this to other digital technologies as well, which are not just sites of harm, violence, and inequality, but are also possibly democratic or empowering or inclusive, and if those examples could serve as the blueprints, for the future, that would be great. So I'd love to understand if there are any such examples where AI and digital platforms have been empowering and could be great examples to take forward to the future, that okay, look, this is one way that we could go. And for example, Shohini, when you had spoken about um, could AI be supporting survivors to report online harm and violence? Because, when we're reporting it on these platforms, nobody has a clue which slot it should go to, how long it takes for my query or my complaint to be addressed. So, I mean, that's just one example. I'd love to hear more from you guys. And maybe we could go with Jyoti first, since Shohini, you just went previously before this. So maybe Jyoti, we could hear from you first.
Sure. Nida, a lot of positive adoption of AI came to the fore, especially by the government. We were all there at the summit. A lot of language access models are being built. We saw physical examples of the language. I'm forgetting its name. That the government has built an AI system for language access. A lot of accessibility tools are being built for people in the lower sections of the society to access healthcare, financial advice, and then safety detection systems that are being used globally. A lot of global partners that we work with are also working here in India now with the support of METI. We have, KID, we have several others, VYS, all working on safety detection systems. A lot of educational systems are being built that are being implemented across the country on that. So a lot of positives. I can share with you the names of the AI models, maybe over, I'll email them to you. I don't want to be wrong in how I call them out, but I'm aware of these. So it's not all doom and gloom. There is a lot of good that AI adoption is also bringing to us. We talk about safety more because we know we want it to be at the top of the conversation always. But that is one area that where I think we're all lacking even now.
Yeah, thanks for that. I like also, it's good to hear that when you say that. I mean, it's not all doom and gloom. Where there is doom and gloom, and we should be highly, highly aware and critical of how we're engaging with it. We also have to be aware of where we're using it and what could be, even if there are very few, those really good blueprints and examples, which we should be taking forward. We should be pushing out much more, because, well, that's also how algorithms work. Repetition will make it, will something appear more visible and higher. Neha, I'd love to get your perspective. What are some possibly empowering and inclusive blueprints of AI and technology platforms in general that you've seen? It could be even be around narrative building or around how young people are using it, which is, I don't know, hopeful and exciting. It causes some excitement and hope in you as well?
Uh, I I believe I have two examples, but uh, I am also not able to recall their like names right now. One was um, um, it had started over LinkedIn, and then like that story had caught on, was in traffic, who's wearing helmet and who's not, like helmet detection AI models. um, and the other one was, I was just recently at an event, and they were giving out awards for positive AI, um, um, uh, use cases, or positive AI um, examples. And one of them was, in a lot of court cases, like there are a lot of pending court cases and there's a lot of paperwork involved. And so there's this legal AI system that has come into uh, place now, where that's helping cases move forward a lot quickly, by reading and going through a lot of these case files very quickly. I'll share the names like in the chat box, but I feel like like these are some of the use cases that I feel like gives me hope that AI is being used positively as well.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Neha. Shoini, I'd love to get your 2 cents on this.
Thanks. I was just trying to unmute myself. So I think to projects that give me like hope are ones that really work to reimagine current forms of AI, the way AI is built, what it's built for, uh, who it's built with, all of those things. And I'll give just 4 or 5, well, maybe 3 or 4. Let me not be ambitious. Examples. The first is looking at data. So I think when we are speaking about AI systems, AI models, AI applications that are meaningful for people, is people for whom many of these large models are not built with them primarily in mind. They're not the central user. They're not the first user that's that is envisioned. So for this data like feminist data projects are kind of exciting. One is where I think it's called Feminist Data Set or something like that. That's a project where they're looking at data, like fully just about data. How is this data being collected? What data is being collected? What does the labeling look like? Who is doing the labeling? What type of authorship are they given in the building of this AI system? Are they just like the invisible labor, or are they also builders of AI? The training of the data, what type of algorithms to use. So like at each step, is the data intersectional? What does intersectionality mean? So like reflection and interrogation as a central part of whatever data is being used and the way it's being used. So that's one project that I think is interesting to me. Another is I think Jyoti and Neha spoke to this a little bit, is what type of uh, what type of end products is being created. So there's this project called iMore AI. I I'm not I'm not remembering what country it's from, but it's one of the Latin American countries, and they are looking at how what are the data like what's the data say on gender-based violence, and how can you make it more transparent, how can you bring it to the foreground, to basically like for effective advocacy. So that's one. So that's the application. So the positive application of uh, AI systems. I think Hamle has this violence indicator. They used an AI powered large language model to classify and monitor the spread of hate speech. So again, using existing models for foregrounding experiences of people who are, like, who often are gender minorities or sexual minorities, or religious minorities in various ways. And then there is, these are like kind of maybe not modifications, but taking the existing systems and re-examining it. There are other projects which fully reimagine like what AI building can look like completely. It reimagines that digital infrastructures as spaces of care, spaces of transparency. It's not built on concepts of efficiency and effectiveness and just that, right? So there's a project done by Derechos Digitales, and they examine whether it's even possible to develop AI without reproducing logics of expression. They worked with a diverse work team. They used an intersectional approach. They created certain agreements and collaboration principles of reflexivity and interrogation, very feminist ideals, to and transparency, spaces of ensuring that knowledge is shared, and there isn't a black box of AI model where you don't know how this output has gotten created. So I think projects that, so the derechos project for me is personally really exciting because it reimagines it questions and pushes back against the idea that AI is inevitable and AI in its current iteration is inevitable. That all we can do is catch up and just try and respond to it in the iteration that it is currently. Resistance, reimagination, all of these are central to me. These are central principles that I hold true when I engage with AI.
Thanks for that. I think what you said about interrogation was really important for me. That it's a process, and that constant questioning and critical hat and interrogation is very important. Because you would do that if you were talking to a real person, you were having a conversation about any topic, you would do that, right? There would be a back and forth, there would be a process, there would be a questioning, there would be, you would ask each other questions back and forth, and wouldn't take anything at simple face value. I think uh thank you so much, to all three of you, for the last 1 hour 15 minutes. We've really just, and this is still, I know if I ask any three of you, this will be like we've scratched the surface. अभी तो बहुत इसमें बहुत कुछ और बातें हो सकती हैं, each of these topics, in themselves. But thank you for painting that picture for us on, uh, how AI and as technologies are being looked at by young people, by women, by people of gender minorities, and kis tarike se, there is a lot of excitement, there is a lot of upskilling for getting used to and upskilling yourself through AI, but there is also a lot of harm and inequality that is being reproduced by AI systems. And it's really been nice to hear some of your examples on, different forms of harm, some of the approaches that you think are missing, as well as, who are the stakeholders who must come together to work at the intersection of this, and also on the approaches that you all have pointed out, going forward, that we need to, because it's not just about what is visible through AI, but it's also about the process, and what takes to make that AI and that language and that platform inclusive. So I think that's been really really wonderful. I want to thank all three of you. And we've got a bunch of questions, काफी सवाल आए हैं chat box में, and we had already curated some questions during registration as well. We had kept a section open for all participants that, in case they want to ask you something. So I'm first going to go with a few questions that have already come during registration, some that have come in the chat box, and then, if any get missed, we'll open it up to participants. So um, I think one question that was coming from a lot of young people was that, what can we actually do? If this is the scene, and if it's like, whether from concerns and fears about deepfakes and online harm and abuse, what are some of the practical ways in which young people can contribute to building more equitable and inclusive, safe digital spaces, particularly when it comes to AI and other tech? I think this was one question that we got repeatedly from lots of people who signed up. I mean, either one of you could share, take this question on.
Sure. I
Yeah.
think the most important would be to start having these conversations when we go on ground, when we go on campuses. um, we see a lot of people have a lot of these opinions, but either they don't have the spaces or they hesitate to share. And I feel like that creation of safe spaces is also very important, where they can talk about these kind of things. So I think having conversations is very important. Um, and I think what we've also noticed is young people listen to other young people. So if you feel like you are alone in something, you feel like, this is something that you want to advocate for, but you're feeling alone. There's no one to kind of join you. I think again, having those conversations and then kind of forming that community of their own, um, to talk about it and then to take actions as well, is what I would suggest.
Thanks, Neha. Yeah. Shohini, Jyoti, would either one of you want to add something?
So I think, I mean, what Neha said is really is true, to have these conversations, to engage. I think engagement with it, there's a gendered element to this as well, that so technology is for technologists, and you can only engage with it as a user and cannot contribute to shaping it, and I think that's untrue. So I that would be my only addition to what Neha has already said, that if engaging with AI is something you want to do, then the hesitation shouldn't be that I'm not a technologist, so I can only engage with it a certain way. The more you speak about it, read about it, play with AI systems, think about what are the risks and all of those things while doing all of the while engaging with these systems. um, yeah, I think it takes away this power imbalance of people
Mm.
who are
Yeah.
currently developing it and hold and often there is a real, of course there is a real power imbalance, but some amount of it is also like given by our like hesitation around calling ourselves more than just users of technology.
Yeah. Thanks for that. I think the next question that we've got is, I think this was a question for Jyoti, but Jyoti has had to leave because she had a emergency, I believe, so she's had to leave the meeting. But we could see if Neha or if Shohini, you guys want to take this question on, because I think in the middle when Jyoti was speaking, she was speaking about guardrails, right? And I believe the guardrails conversation is really about accountability and, what kind of governance processes are we setting up. And we all know this conversation, right, from the famous trial of Mark Zuckerberg, where he was fired, in the parliament in the states, where he had to answer questions about Meta as a platform. There's a lot of that going on now, right? What's the accountability? What are the guardrails that we want? Do you guys have anything you want to share, that what are some of those guardrails, or governance systems that we expect platforms to have, or that they should have, or that need to be spoken about before?
I think platforms already have some of the guardrails in place that we want to have. So, like things like consent. Um, but I feel like just the implementation of it needs to be strengthened more. As I had mentioned earlier, it's not like Grok or X as a platform, they did not already have safety guardrails. It's just there was a gap while it was like within its implementation. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Shohini, you want to add something?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, so I think there are two things. One is there. Okay, in terms of guardrails, there when models are rolled out, so there are guardrails are two stages, I think, when you look at guardrails and accountability mechanisms. One is at the model stage, so AI models, foundational models, frontier models, however you want to say it. I don't know how much of that is getting built now, but still,
Yeah.
regulating it at that point is crucial in terms of what could be the potential, whether it's safety risk assessment, or there are many of these, like due diligence systems, processes, checklists that have been developed, but it's not uniform. It is very much company driven, and how much
Hmm.
how much and
Yeah.
how, like what of that, the the company that's rolling out that model wants to um, enact, like, so that needs to be regulated. So it cannot just be upon companies to define what fairness, transparency, safety, privacy, all of these core core principles look like. And then also then regulation and guardrails at the application stage of it. So if someone's using a foundational model for Nudify apps or something like that,
Yeah.
what why isn't sufficient action being taken on that? Why and there's while certain new laws are required, I feel that certain existing laws can also address some of the harms that are happening, as a result of how AI models are being applied. And I think crucially and centering, the concept of consent has to be there. It isn't just because a synthetic image of you is being used. There still wasn't consent. It might,
Yeah.
whether it is you or isn't you, and the embodiment of synthetic images and what that means, that can be a broader discussion point, and we can look at regulation around that. But at the core of it, consent of your image was not there. And I think then the other aspect of it, is to have privacy by design, safety by design. Oftentimes the guardrails are at the stage of once the harm has happened, once the incident has happened, and not at the prevention stage, at the before anyone could make a sexualized, non-consensual sexualized image on Grok. Why wasn't there the design of
To limit, yeah, yeah.
yeah, to limit that? So yeah, so I think those are some of the guardrails that I would advocate for.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for that. Uh, Uh, I think my next question is again to both of you that somebody has asked, Linakshi from ECF has asked, how is AI connected with gender norms and what precautions can we take while sharing our data with AI? There's a lot of concerns that have come in the registration and in the chat box around, I think how is AI connected with gender norms to some degree? I think all three of our panelists did outline that, but if you want to contextualize it again, and what precautions can we take while sharing our data with AI or when dealing with uh, AI generated abuse? I know that, for example, there's a big petition going on in the UK and the US for specific laws around this, and there are a lot of those going around in social media as well. That this is where you report, this is how you report, but we're not sure if the same exists in India. The rest of us possibly don't know. There isn't enough awareness. So I'd love to hear from both of you.
So I mean, since I'm unmuted, I can just start. I'll give two concrete examples of the question around AI and gender norms. How is AI really? How is gender norms really, like? How do we see it? Gender norms or gender inequality? How do we see it in AI? One, if you think about AI assistants, most AI assistants are feminine. I think that has changed over the last few years a little bit, but the gendered thinking around that in positions of help and support, these there are feminine bodies, and then that offline conceptualization that gets codified in the outputs, in the AI outputs. I think the second way is in the way AI is used and envisioned to be used. So when we think about something like women's public safety, let's use AI powered cameras to surveil and create a more safer environment. But what does it mean in terms of uh, that protectionist approach that has come into now the use of AI? That protectionist approach that is rooted in gendered thinking of safety might mean that we need to like create these systems that where surveillance surpasses privacy and surveillance surpasses other elements to ensure an environment of safety. I think when thinking about what to keep in mind and how to keep yourself safe, I mean, I think it depends on think about. I think we have to do a little bit more research, and there isn't a lot of time. And I'll be happy to share some resources. But there are some models that are more that are collecting more data. Your data can be used to train. You can decide not to allow your data to be trained. Being mindful of what what type of questions, what type of data are you sharing when engaging with generative AI models. That being said, I think also like just keeping in mind that even if your data, even if, for example, my name, I'm not using my name when engaging with a Gen AI say model like a Chat GPT. There's metadata still around it, so it is challenging. I think it's hard to give an answer on what should one be aware of, but I think at the user level, what information are you giving, and then at the application level, what type of data are they collecting, and how much control are they giving to the user, and can you utilize that to limit how much data you're giving to the models?
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for that. Neha, you want to add something, or you want to add a little bit, or we
Um, I think Shovini covered it mostly, but I feel like it's similar to when you first introduced to social media. How much can we share on social media? How much can we share on the internet? What is leaking? What is not? What kind of information is being given to third parties without your consent, etc. So I feel like there are like some kind of guidelines that are already out there, which are just like basics. Okay, do's and don'ts, that this is what you don't share with AI. But like as Shoini said, it's still a very um, kind of newer and also harder to navigate area.
Yeah, thanks. I think the next question is there were two more questions in this, I think. One is interesting question. One is around that, some Swapnil is asked in the group that, if the panel could reflect on democratizing articulation. Many people from diverse sections of society have the intellect but lack the privileged writing style or the language or the English language expected in high growth sectors? Does the panel see AI as a tool to finally level the playing field by focusing on the essence of an idea rather than, formal polished English? Maybe if we could just get your comments on what both of you think on this. Do you think it's leveling the playing field? Yes, no. Is that too simplistic an answer? What do you think?
I'll try and be very quick on this because I don't think any of these answers are kind of quick. I know that people use AI systems a lot for to polish language, and language. It really, like, in terms of how can AI be used for good. I mean, this is one of the ways. That being said, what type of language gets reproduced? What does it mean for it further down the line that um, if this type of language is not presented, then the value of the content that the person is presenting is not valued? Like, so that's at a more fundamental level, that yes, it solves for one problem, but it doesn't solve at a more basic level or a more foundational level. But that being said, yes, I think people use it for language a lot. But what type of, like, knowledge systems are getting reproduced in that, it's also important to reflect upon that.
Yeah. Thanks. Neha, would you want to comment? And then, we can move to the next question. Okay, I think we may have lost Neha. At this point, I would actually request, if anybody has questions, to please, if you could raise your hand, and we're going to unmute you, and then you can ask the question. So Laura actually has a question for both of you.
I
Laura,
think
yes.
Neha is muted. I think she would have wanted to respond. I think she may be having a tech issue. Can just check.
Yeah, just check with her. Yeah, meanwhile, Laura, go ahead.
Yeah,
Sorry. We have a few more questions in the chat box, Nida. You can
yeah,
check
yeah.
it.
Go ahead, and I'll ask the last one. Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, I think one more question was, okay, so all our panelists have to leave very quickly. Everybody has a hard stop. So we're going to wrap it up in another 5 minutes, but not without a group selfie. And the last question that Laura has, one question was around, listen, if AI is going to generate all this already reproduce gender biases, then how can I avoid that bias, as a layperson? Uh, and should there be gender audits for AI systems before they are deployed to the masses? I think Neha has had to step away. Shohini, we're going to direct the questions to you now. Yeah. Oh, please unmute Shohini. She's unable to unmute herself.
Yes,
Mariam,
thank you
I
so
will.
much.
Yes.
So I think there isn't again the main thing I would say is reflection, and to check to cross check it the way we would do any other form of research. How can you avoid the bias? The short answer is you can't. If there's existing bias, you we don't know the data that's being used to train these models, and we don't know therefore what type of bias it is reproducing. But yeah, I think cross reference, if it's a research thing, if it's a research topic, to cross reference it with other forms of knowledge would be important. And should there be gender audits? Yes. I don't know exactly like what there should be many forms of audits. There should be risk assessments. There should be many more forms of due diligence before an AI system is deployed for usage to the masses, but also which masses, right? Like are these gender audits also created in global majorities, and therefore would be
Yeah.
only looking at certain forms of gender, certain ways of that gender shows up. Is it going to be intersectional? Is it going to look at caste? Is it going to look at religion in you know in various global majority societies? So yeah, yes, there should. The short answer is yes, there should be different types of audits. The longer answer is it really needs to be more contextual.
Yeah. Thanks, Shohini. I think Laura, are you on?
Yeah.
Are you unmute?
Yeah.
Yes, please go
Hi.
ahead.
Yeah. No, first of all, thanks a lot for that fantastic conversation. I mean, extremely deep and lots of takeaways. And one kind of profound thought that one has is, all these big tech companies who are supposed to be doing their bit, sometimes you're so helpless, right? Large part of the onus lies with them, and how does one engage with them in an effective manner, because even governments are not able to negotiate effectively. So as civil society, what's the kind of advocacy that we need to be doing? That's one thought that I was having. But kind of follow up to that, I just wanted to ask you, Shoini, you mentioned about protectionism, which was very important kind of point that you mentioned, that, whether it's in online or in offline physical spaces, negotiating risk is a part of the game, right? You're out there, it's been that, it's something that has always something that women have had to deal with, going out there and negotiating risks, and the risks are real. But in that context, I wanted to hear your take on, steps like, for example, in Australia, social media has been banned for under 16, and, constantly when these conversations happen and they say, you ban it. So I just want your take, kind of, point of view on how you feel young people, when I'm talking about maybe, age group of maybe 10 to 18, because after all, young people are on the net because of, online schooling, etc. There's no shying away from it. So children are there, and there's no point in pretending that they're not. So how does one negotiate that age group, which is vulnerable? It is very empowering for many of them. We've seen, especially from rural areas, it gives a fantastic opportunity for young people to be out there expressing themselves, getting access to knowledge and information. But how do you, protect them from the risks without taking away their agency?
Thanks. And I think it would have been great if Neha could be here because she could speak more to that population, as point of view doesn't work very closely with the younger population. But I do want to just flag one thing that yes, there has to be certain guardrails in place for a more vulnerable population, like minors, young people at that age. Not I'm not talking about youth, but I'm talking about uh, this young people. That being said, we also have to think about what sort of guardrails works for us. If in our country with so many shared phone users, um, are social media accounts being even opened in the young people's names? Is it being opened in the mother's name, in the father's name, in the elder brother's name, and they're all using the same account? Then, or the young person's using that accounts. So in that case, what does it mean to have a social media ban? Will it be effective? Will it actually reach the objective that it means to? So I think one is, rather than like talking about specific guardrails that might be useful, I think it's important that to not just copy paste a guardrail that might not be as relevant to our context. And yes, and to still center agency of young people, opportunities, and look at all aspect of it. And yeah, I think in general, like, has protectionism worked as a principle? Um, to just reflect on that, I think I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, thank you so much, Shohini. And unfortunately, Neha has had a power cut, so she's had to leave the webinar as tech suggests. Tech challenges are always there. And you know, thank you so much to all three of you for coming on this webinar with us, and thank you to all the participants who joined with us. As you can see that all three panelists have also shared their email addresses in the chat box, and Mariam has also shared our email addresses at CEQUIN. If there are more questions, please write to us. We will try to circulate your questions and get responses, and also share some resources back with everyone who registered for this webinar. And before I close this webinar, I would request everyone to switch on their camera momentarily if they can, because we would love to take a photo of everybody who has remained till the very end of this webinar, because applauses must be given to not just shuru mein kaun judta hai, but end tak kaun rukta hai. So I would really, really like it if all participants could open their cameras just for a second, and we'd love to take a photo of everyone. And it would also be nice to see everyone's faces momentarily. Thank you, everyone. And it was really, really wonderful. Camera is disabled by host. Oh no, Mariam, please enable everyone's camera. They are not able to open their cameras. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया सभी का वेबिनार में जुड़ने के लिए हमारे साथ. And each month, CEQUIN will bring a new webinar, a new virtual conversation forward, looking at different thematics. And you know that our work focuses on gender-based violence in public spaces, and technology is a space, and it is very much a public space जहाँ पे अलग-अलग forms of gender-based violence reproduce होते हैं. And therefore, please reach out to us, as organizations or as young people. If you would like to host a webinar, if there is a topic that is close to your heart, feel free to reach out to us. We will collaborate with you. We will set it up. We will curate the panel. And this is a really exciting piece going forward. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. Yeah, now everybody can open their cameras again. Mariam has told me that disabled option अब on हो गया है, so people can in fact open their cameras. तो एक बार और अगर आप लोग अपना कैमरा ऑन कर सकते हैं. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Please feel free to write to us and leave comments in the chat box for anything that you would like to ask. And the recording of this webinar will be up on CEQUIN's YouTube, and we will share it back with all the registered partners, so you can share it with other people जो इस webinar का हिस्सा नहीं बन पाए इस बार, or if you want to refer back to it as a resource for learning, so you can do that as well. Thank you so much, everyone. Bye bye.
Thank you.